Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the BC Poly Hotstove. The kids are back in school, the politicians are wandering around making announcements, TransMountain is back in court, and we are back on the beat here at BC Poly Hotstove. I'm Jordan Bateman, I'm the Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, the mighty ICBA, joined as always by
the mighty ORCA. I'm Maclean K, the editor-in-chief of the Orca, joining you live from the beautiful legislature in Victoria.
the beautiful, antiquated legislature.
Yep, the rock pile.
Yep, there you go. An old building, old ways of thinking, and an 1970s style government.
And if you're watching this as opposed to listening to it, you can tell by the production values here, very old Wi-Fi as well.
Yeah, one day we should actually give everyone like the full screen view of like what you see past your little pop-up banner there, because it's atrocious. I'm not gonna lie.
Can you imagine a very old walk-in closet filled with 80s equipment? You've just pictured my little world headquarters studio here.
I think before we end the show, our dream goal should be to have you do a podcast live from Keith Baldry's window.
I could probably make that happen.
I've sat there. I've done an interview in Keith Baldry's window, and it's the greatest thing for a BC political geek. Like it's the best. All right. Well, we had our format sheet, but a big piece of news that kind of transcends everything. TransMountain, as we said, back in court. The Federal Court of Appeal has given leave to appeal on 6 grounds to a group of anti-pipeline folks based around the second round, which is actually might be the second round of consultation that was done with Indigenous people. This was the one that responded to the court challenge last year. Our legal experts, the legal beagles who've been breaking this down, don't seem too worried about it from a pro-TransMountain point of view, but anytime courts get involved with TransMountain, or virtually any energy project these days in Canada, you get a little bit nervous, Maclean.
Well, I mean, I don't even know how to react. It's just, I mean, how many times have we talked about this exact story in this exact situation? A lot of this is going to revolve around someone's definition of what adequate consultation means. There are those who believe it means an effective veto. That's obviously those who are launching this latest challenge. And there are those who think, in my view, more reasonably, that consultation does not mean giving the other party a
capitulation,
final say-so. Yeah, it means consultation.
Yeah.
And so, if this latest round of consultations were deemed to be inadequate in someone's views, then we're going to be right back where we started.
Yeah, it's frustrating, I think, because this is a project that I think has been in court 20 times and won 19 of them. You could make the case that these are starting to become like vexatious litigants. Like when you go 1 in 19, well, first of all, you might be the BC Lions, but when you go 1 in 19, it's not a great winning percentage. And just looking at this, the leave for appeal is very narrow, and it's supposed to be done in an expedited way, which is I think the court may be saying, yeah, we should probably take a second look at it, but we're not terribly keen to change our minds again. So we'll see. I mean, hey, as far as we've heard, it won't stop construction, won't stop, contractors are in the midst of a 30-day ramp-up period, won't stop that. So hopefully that is the case. Certainly if you're a federal Liberal politician heading into an election next month, based on the fact you bought the darn thing, you want to show some sort of progress here.
You think so? I realize they are not exactly comparable situations, but does this not start to kind of feel like the proportional representation debate in which one side says it's going to be litigated in one way or another over and over and over and over again until they get the answer they want, at which point it's settled forever?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Quebec separatism, the same thing.
Exactly. It's Canada, man. I don't know what else to say. Maclean, why don't you take us into our big splash? And I see, yet again, you're picking on those poor, nice souls at the federal NDP.
Okay.
Why do you hate the federal NDP so much?
I don't hate them. I want them to be
every week on the podcast. Oh, the NDP sucks. Jagmeet Singh,
They've been in the news for all the wrong reasons lately. One does start to sort of almost feel sorry for them. The latest news is that the NDP is having enormous troubles across the country in getting candidates nominated for a collection of reasons, most of which are resource related, and by which I mean they don't have the resources to vet them. There was a story yesterday about a pile of former candidates in New Brunswick who are essentially defecting to the Greens. Now, this isn't necessarily an indication of a national trend, but the one problem is a few NDP-connected commentators have been saying, well, this is because they're racists. And they want a leader who is whiter, as one said. This is me quoting somebody. I'm not making this up, and I wouldn't make that.
Shame.
Now, accusing someone of wanting to jump ship for what looks like a ship going the other direction
let's pause for a second. These were vetted former NDP candidates, 14 of them.
Some of them, I don't know if all of them were.
No, one was a party president. I think 14 were former candidates. So, former vetted party candidates for the NDP, and yet now they're racist.
Exactly.
So now, if they were racist, they probably didn't just wake up racist. They were probably racist for a long time, like when they were on the ballot for you.
Yeah, well, or it's contagious. They watched one Maxime Bernier speech online, and all of a sudden it catches fire.
He's a riveting guy.
Here's the thing. There are 10 ridings in New Brunswick federally. The NDP are not particularly competitive in any of them. The closest they came in any riding was they were 10 points behind the Liberals. In most of them, they were outpaced by something like, they finished second in a good number of these ridings. In fact, I think most of them. But 10 points was the closest they came. In most of them, they were getting blown out, 25 points. The point I'm making is that this is not sort of, some unbeatable band of brothers we're talking about. This is, some NDP retreads in a province where they haven't had a lot of success. And so could you argue this is no great loss? Yes, I suppose you could. But, the NDP seems to be having problems attracting candidates across the country. And, man, is it ever a bad look for – now, this is not Jagmeet Singh saying this, but even those affiliated with the NDP to hint or, in fact, say – that this is because they're racist and don't want to run for a party with fronted by a brown guy in a turban. Man, that is an ugly look.
It is ugly. Maclean, do you think the NDP hold on to official party status? Like, a bunch of their sitting MPs aren't running. Nathan Collins not running. They're falling into pieces. They have no organization. They have fewer than half their candidates locked up, which means a bunch of shoulder taps. They're tanking in Quebec.
They are.
Can they I'm starting to get hard pressed to find 4 NDPers across the country who can win.
I think they probably have that number in BC, not a whole lot more than that. They'll have a few.
Is Jagmeet going to win that riding again?
It's a tight riding, but it is a traditional NDP riding. They chose it for a reason. He's got a very, very good shot at the worst case. I do think he does win that riding, if only because I think the the TransMountain thing is probably going to work in his favor there. But you're right. There is a lot of other ridings that were formerly safe seats that now look dodgy at best. And Quebec is probably going to be a disaster for them. Now, how many times have we said it's, we have a few months to go, much can happen in the campaign. Jagmeet Singh could do phenomenally well in the leaders' debates. We don't know. So there's a lot that can happen in the few months, but right now, man, do things look dismal for the federal NDP.
Yeah, they really do. They really do. I think if you're hoping for the Jagmeet Singh debate Hail Mary, take it from a guy who's watched Aaron Rodgers complete a few. That one's going to fall incomplete. All right, my big thing was the big ass waste of time, the big ass review. BC Utilities Commission looks at gas prices, finds no collusion, finds shockingly that in a market where there are many, many effects on gas prices, that gas prices go up and down. They do claim some sort of 13 cent per liter unexplained problem. Blair King has since weighed in, and I'll take Blair King over the BC Utilities Commission every day of the week and twice on Sunday, saying, look, the clean gas provisions, the fact that BC has to have a unique mix of gasoline additives, which means we can't batch it with stuff that they can sell in Washington State or in Alberta or California or wherever. That is probably the lion's share of that 13 cents. No talk of taxes, of course. Because John Horgan refused to let them talk about taxes. No talk of that clean energy standard, really, even though, again, that's a John Horgan pseudo-carbon tax, brought in by the Liberals, but continued on by Horgan and increased by Horgan. And somehow, I got to head to the BC Utilities Commission. They did show a slight bit of backbone by sliding in a little reference to the TransMountain pipeline. pointing out that by expanding the pipeline, you would actually bring down gasoline prices, which anyone with half a brain and an understanding of economics and supply and demand said, yeah, obviously. But that, of course, does not apply to our wonderful Premier or Dr. Weaver.
No, it's fun. We've talked about this before. We've canvassed this issue. Unless you're alleging that there is out and out open collusion driving up gas prices in BC, it makes no sense to not address things like fuel carbon standards, the things like seasonal demand, and also supply and demand with things like the pipeline, and of course taxes. So I mean, I don't understand why they failed to include those. Well, I do understand, but it just makes it less credible on the whole. There could well be, again, I don't think that even Bruce Ralston or John Horgan wants to say that these gas companies are out and out ripping us off on purpose together, because that is a very loaded accusation to make. But at this point, they probably have to do something, don't they?
Hey, when have Bruce Ralston and John Horgan ever said something outlandish about anyone and ended up in court over it? Come on.
That's a very good point.
Gordon Wilson, if for those of you keeping score at home. No, the whole thing was a waste of time and money. It just showed what multiple studies throughout the years have shown, that these gas companies aren't price fixing or anything like that. They are reacting to market demands and to taxation levels. I guess it's out now for 30 days for public feedback or feedback from those stakeholders. Hopefully the gas companies put the pedal to the metal and really lay the boots to this thing and point out all the different tax issues. I do think the media, by and large, did a pretty good job of reading through the BS and not letting the government off the hook. And I did like the Taxpayers Federation delivering 500 mirrors to John Horgan to help him look in the mirror to understand why gas prices were so high. But I'm a sucker for a good stunt. I'm not going to lie.
And Chris Sims pulled off a very good stunt. Anytime there's a costume on the grounds of the legislature, I think it's a good day.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. All right, Ripples. You're going to do your best Keith Baldry impression and rile up the BC Teachers Federation.
Hey, the teachers are back. They're teaching school right now. This is a good thing. How long is it going to last?
At least two paychecks. At least two paychecks. That's what I believe.
Well, that's exactly where I was going with this. It's like you're reading my mind. A lot of teachers don't get paid over the summer. Some choose to have their paychecks prorated, and I guess that's their choice. They can do it either or. But it's very hard for them to go into a strike if they wanted to, right on Labor Day and the first couple weeks of school, because some of them have already not been paid. It makes much more sense, if you are considering a job action, to bank a couple paychecks and then get serious. And also the other thing is you don't want parents to, if you want to crank up the pressure on the government, you want the kids to start school. You want them to get attached to their teachers, Miss Brown's homeroom class, that kind of thing. If it's just the end of August and it's been extended by 2 weeks, I'm not suggesting that's easy for parents, but it's probably easier than getting into the rhythm for 2 weeks. So the fact that school has started is a good thing, and I think that even Education Minister Rob Fleming would admit, well, I was going to say privately, but I think even publicly, but there's no reason that parents should breathe easy yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's hard to believe. Like, it was a 6-year deal that Peter Fassbender managed to extract from these guys last time. A colossal disaster for the Teachers Federation, where those folks lost so much in strike pay that they never made it back over the course of the contract. Where Peter Fassbender followed the advice of a brilliant young leader of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and gave rebates to parents, rather than having that money kind of floating out there for the Teachers Federation to try to claim. It's just hard to believe, like, where did these 6 years go? It just feels like yesterday. It's amazing to me that we're in this spot again. I guess for my oldest daughter, she's gone into grade 11. This will be her last work stoppage threat, and I think this is be her third. But I still have a grade 9. Is it going to be a 3-year deal that could disrupt grade 12? I have a grade 8, sorry. She's in grade 8. So, 3 or 4 year deal, that could disrupt again. My youngest is in grade 4, so he's got at least 2 more stoppages left in him. Like, it's crazy. Only in BC does this happen. And it's because, I often call them the most militant union in Canada. I get grief for that on Twitter. And then I provide a link to the BC Teachers Federation website where, guess what they call themselves, Maclean? The most militant union in Canada.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not us making it up. It literally is like a bragging point, a messaging point, branding point for these guys. So, parents, buckle up.
And it's funny, well, funny and not if you're a parent who has to deal with these things, or a student, or even, in fact, a teacher who gets caught up in all this, is that they've kind of created this weird thing where they've identified the BC Liberals of the two parties in BC as the enemy. And, we're going to get screwed by them, and we have to be tough and militant and so forth. Exactly. But then the NDP comes in, and it's like they're surprised that, well, no, I think both the NDP and the BCTF look at each other and say, I thought we were friends. I thought the NDP thinks the BCTF is going to go easier on them, and the BCTF thinks the NDP is going to give them everything they want. And that doesn't happen. I mean, how many negotiated settlements have the NDP reached with the BCTF?
Yeah, well, and then, this nonsense, oh, we're the second lowest paid teachers in Canada. Yeah, because he had a 6-year deal, dude. Ask Aaron Rodgers today, he's no longer the highest paid quarterback in football. Why? Because Russell Wilson signed a deal, and the kid in LA signed a deal, and next year Mahomes will sign a deal. He's still doing fine. He's still doing just fine, and, he's operating under a deal he signed. You're operating a deal you signed. So, it's... I don't know, teacher politics in BC, it's the same no matter what party is in power, I guess, and it will be forever and ever, and it's shocking. What really bugs me, though, Maclean, is this. A great teacher is worth their weight in gold. Yeah. I have kids, we've gone to the same school, Indy's in her 4th year at Hearst Public School, and Jackson, they went to the same elementary school. We know as parents who the best teachers are. We know the ones that we want to get our kids, we want our kids in that class because that teacher goes above and beyond, does more. We would love to find ways to pay that human being more money because they're so good at their job. The problem is the Teachers Federation has resisted constantly any effort to do that. And, you go, well, so these great teachers are they are underpaid. But, there are, frankly, crappy teachers who are being grossly overpaid. So, I know teachers well, how would you measure it and all this stuff? I don't know, measure it by parents. We seem to know pretty well. Every parent out on their picking up their kids, waiting to see what their final teacher assignment is hoping for a certain one. That should be a little bit of an indication as to who's probably doing the best job.
Yeah, and I think that I know a few teachers in this province, and they're not this caricature of these raving, angry, militant unionistas that sometimes I think they're just as embarrassed and frustrated by all this as everyone else. It's a handful that seem to be in control of the union, and they like to refer themselves as the sovereign body of the BCTF. You're a teachers union. You're not a sovereign body.
I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the sovereign territory of the Burnaby Teachers Association, the unceded territory. No, you're right. You're supposed to be representing your workers. I've heard from teachers who say, look, they're colleagues of theirs that they don't particularly like, and so they vote them onto the labor front to get them out of schools. Yeah. It's probably true in some cases and not in others. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating for sure.
And we started this by mentioning Keith Baldry, who seems to get in trouble with the BCTF every time he quotes the Minister of Education.
Well, what does that guy know? Come on. What does he know about what's being offered?
Whenever you think of Rob Fleming, he is a credible source when it comes to the state of negotiations.
No, that guy doesn't know anything that's going on at the table, man. Nothing.
Man.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious. Maple Ridge. I want to talk to you about a couple of swing ridings here. So, Maple Ridge was a traditionally BC Liberal territory, taken 2 ridings by the NDP in the last election. If you do your math, you'll be like, holy smokes, that swung the election away from Christy Clark. You're correct. So Maple Ridge is battleground. When you talk about swing ridings in British Columbia for the next provincial election, Maple Ridge, the Surreys, Courtney Comox, that is where this election will be won and lost. Well, the BC Liberals have been making a lot of hay over some supportive housing proposals by the NDP that have been very unpopular with Maple Ridge Council, very unpopular with thousands of Maple Ridge residents who have signed petitions against it. They're scaring the heck out of Bob Deeth and Lisa Bear, the 2 NDP MLAs. And now the Liberals have been given a couple other issues at Maple Ridge, which is good news if you're wanting to see the NDP out of there. Interfor has closed, just announced that they're going to close a mill there, 147 jobs. This is a mill that's been operating since 1908. It's also a mill that, for the 147 jobs, something like 130 of them are organized by the steel workers, which is the NDP's #1 union. Big Steel runs the NDP. So And I'm not saying, I mean, literally, they have people who go back and
Yeah.
forth between the two. And Harry Baines was a still, like, you know,
The connections are strong and deep.
yes, it runs deep. So that's now closed, announced to be closed. That's 147 job losses in Maple Ridge at a time where, you know, it's not easy to get other jobs, and union job losses. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out. And then there's a new marijuana farm out there. So marijuana has been legalized by the feds. In the federal act, it says, in the new Cannabis Growing Act, you know, you have to get all these licenses and approvals, and your operation must not emit odors. Fast forward to South Langley, South Delta, South Abbotsford, and now Maple Ridge. There are these giant, huge industrial marijuana grow operations going in, all legal. Some the size of Costco's. I mean, they're giant cement buildings, not using the soil, not using greenhouse, like hardcore industrial kind of things. And they're not addressing their odors. And that's a big problem in Maple Ridge, where you have farming, you know, farmers, neighbors, real farmers next door growing food, who have had a certain way of life for years and years. And now their neighbor moves in, opens this marijuana farm, and it is, you know, the pungent smell that, you know, we all associate with marijuana. Very bad news. There's a group of citizens, mainly from Aldergrove, who've started a little website called stopthesmell.ca, where you can, you know, type in and they'll send an email to federal and provincial officials in order to try to get this addressed. But again, in a time where Lanapopum and the Agricultural Land Commission are heavily restricting activities on all sorts of farms across the province, everything from, you know, mobile homes for elderly parents to workers' accommodations to a giant bouncing trampoline pillow at Man Farms, which is a big tourist attraction out in Abbotsford, to, you know, kicking a Christmas light display off in Langley, at a time where they seem to be super restrictive on all of these, you know, legitimate farm uses. They refuse to actually enforce this federal law on odor or create any standards for it. And that's, I think, bad news for the NDP as well, because they'll be made to own this, especially given this dichotomy between the aggressive nature of the ALC and the refusal to do anything on this.
What can you say other than it's a big giant mess?
Yeah.
I mean, legalization has been uneven at best. That's as far as I'm willing to go diplomatically. Look, this is, yeah. There are people, I've seen this debate online about the odor issue, for example, and people pointing out, well, you know, I'm sorry, but it smells. And then you have some advocates on the other side either denying that it does or saying, too bad, suck it up. It's just not helpful.
These aren't mom and pop operations, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
No one's going into the marijuana grow operation with $50 in their pocket and, you know, buying. It's not like you're buying 10 chickens and starting your little farm from there. These are massive, multi-million-dollar companies who hire former cabinet ministers like Terry Lake and other folks around, you know, former attorney generals and, you know, all sorts of fancy lobbyists. They have millions and millions, if not billions of dollars. Some of them are owned in part by nicotine companies. And, like, this is big money, quote-unquote, farming. And, you know, so they go into these areas. Sure, okay, fine. Is farming, go into those areas, but make sure you're following the federal law. Make sure you're doing everything you can to scrub those odors. You know, it's one thing if Joe Farmer sits there and lights up a legal, you know, marijuana joint after, you know, a hard day on the farm, and you smell that. Well, you know, this farmer Joe. But to be suddenly you have this giant industrial operation pop up next to you, and then just breaking federal law by spewing stuff into the air. That's where it gets really unfair. And it's going to come back to bite these guys, these NDPs, folks in Maple Ridge. And now all of a sudden, it's not just about social housing in Maple Ridge. Now you got the mill, now you've got this. You know, these issues start to pile up. And if you're the BC Liberals, you're rubbing your hands with glee and saying, let's get in there.
Yeah, well, and those were two of the most tightly contested ridings in the province, if you'll correct me. But I think they were very close indeed. Yeah,
and look, the NDP are in Maple Ridge Mission only won because Mark Dalton was considered by some social conservatives as not socially conservative enough, which still is a head scratcher.
Which, if you know Mark Dalton, is
that's hard to be.
Not accurate.
Yeah. All right, who's hot in politics? Oh, you're picking on Jagmeet again here.
I'm not. Well, the heat is the bromance between our Premier John Horgan and the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who are very fond of each other. And you know what? that's a good thing most of the time when the premier and the prime minister, regardless of party, get along. But it does get awkward when there's a federal election coming up, and John Horgan, who is a member of the federal NDP, has a leader who will be contesting a seat in this province, Jagmeet Singh. Man, is it going to be difficult for Jagmeet to avoid some of those press clippings about John Horgan talking about all that he has managed to accomplish with Justin Trudeau and what a great prime minister he is, and the quotes coming back the other way just as strong, and an endorsement from Justin Trudeau. You would think they are members of the same party. And so
Are you saying he may not vote, John Horgan may not vote for the NDP in this election? Someone should ask him.
Well, we'll have the opportunity to ask him shortly. That's actually a really good question, because he has said that he enjoys working with Justin Trudeau, and he feels that they've gotten a lot done together, and that's good. But that come November, you're right. That is an interesting question for him.
He'll duck it.
Oh yeah, he'll duck it, but it's still going to be fun to ask.
And then when he ducks it, but sir, aren't you a member of the New Democratic Party? Doesn't that? Is it part of your membership that you vote for that party? But anyways, So good for Trudeau and Horgan. I didn't think anything would be hotter than Melania and Trudeau, but there you go. Okay, my hot politician. I'm going to name two. There are 338 federal ridings. The Conservative Party of Canada is the first to have 338 candidates nominated. A third of those candidates are female, despite having no quotas and no strict rules as to who can run where. And I have to say kudos to all of those candidates, because every single one of them had to go through a nomination process. They had to get vetted. They had to sign up members. They had to most often run in a race. There were none of these parachute candidates or superstar candidates who just kind of float on in. But I want to bring attention to two people who. If they become the face of the Conservative Party of Canada, this would be, a great thing for conservatism long term. One is Claire Ratti. She is in Skeena Bulkley Valley, which unfortunately is a tough riding for the CPC. But she is young, she's cool, she's tattooed, she's pierced. She owns Kitimat's first tattoo studio. She's owned it with her partner for 8 years. Former city councillor for Kitimat, the youngest city councillor in Kitimat's history. She is out there pounding the pavement, and just completely different than that kind of stereotype you have in your mind of the typical conservative candidate. So Claire is worth watching in this next campaign. And the other one I'm going to do is Shinder Purwal, my friend running in Fleetwood Port Kells. He is, mark my words, he's going to vanquish the TransLink flunky that was Ken Hardy, the Liberal MP who got in because of the Trudeau wave. I predict that Shinder Purwal, former Citizenship Court judge, political science professor at KPU, very accomplished man, author of several books, including one that taught me more about Punjabi politics than anything I've read before or since. I believe that Shinder Purwal will win that. And any legislature, any parliament that has people like Shinder Purwal and Claire Ratti in it or vying for it is stronger because of that. So there you go.
And here's how you can tell the Orca has made it. Just like Global had situations where former contributors like Steve Darling were running in the last provincial election, so too do we, as Shinder Purwal, a former Orca contributor, is running in the next federal election. And without taking a position, we obviously wish Shinder very, very well.
I'm taking a position.
You can do that.
All right, your cold politician. Here we go.
Jagmeet. Well, I covered this. It's
quit dogpiling on Jagmeet.
I try not to. I don't dislike. Hey, you know what? I'm going to say something nice about Jagmeet. I liked his Quebec language ad. His French language ad. I thought it was very effective.
Who's having the worst year, Jagmeet Singh or the BC Lions offensive line?
Oh. It's got to be the BC Lions because of expectations. They were supposed to be really good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right. My cold politician, Amarjeet Sohi, he is looking it up. The Natural Resources Minister for Canada, Trudeau Liberal. And last night he's frustrated. He's in his car. He's waiting for a train to pass in Edmonton. Probably has to get to an event or something. And he tweets out a few words, tweets out a picture of the train with it's 5:30 p.m. This train is so annoying. One little problem, Maclean, it's an oil train in Alberta, shipping oil because his government killed Energy East and the Keystone Pipeline. And, has TransMountain years behind schedule. You can bet what the Twitter reaction was, including Brad Wall, who absolutely torched that guy with his own tweet saying, Minister, they're shipping oil, or perhaps in this case, they're shipping irony.
Yeah, and Amarjeet Sohi is the MP for, I think it's Edmonton Mill Woods, and has the distinction of winning his seat by, you'll correct me, I believe it was less than 100 votes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was razor thin. It was within the margin of error, basically. And his conservative opponent, Tim Upal, is running against him again this time. So, I mean, he's in for a fight.
Yeah, you know what Amarjeet should be doing? He should be driving to the cigarette store, getting a cigarette, getting a blindfold, because that guy is a DOA. So, yes, I've yet to see anyone anywhere predicting an Amarjeet Sohi re-election in Edmonton. So there you go.
A tough uphill climb, put it that way.
Hey, I'm going to leave you guys with one other piece of news. So Burnaby Hospital is being replaced. This looks like might be one of the last big hospital announcements by the NDP. I would note it's still not in the budget, but it should be next year. Here's the interesting thing about that Burnaby Hospital situation, construction project. Number one, not a union-only monopoly, which, like St. Paul's Hospital, also not a union-only monopoly, which kind of makes you wonder,
Interesting.
Now that the bills are starting to pile up for the transportation monopolies, maybe, Adrian Dix with a little bit more clout at the table than Claire Trevina can wriggle out of those stupid provisions. That would be my suggestion. And number two, generally billion-dollar plus projects, construction projects, receive a multitude of bidders because it's guaranteed work for such a long period of time. Certainly a high-profile project like this would look great on any construction company or group's websites. This one did not get multiple bids. It had one bidder, Ellis Dawn, who, congratulations to them, are the successful bidder. But one wonders, I have my very educated opinions on this, but one wonders what's going on with the NDP building strategy and budgeting that they can only attract one bidder for a major project like this. And the answer, of course, is their crazy labor practices make everything more expensive, and they're very difficult to deal with. So that's not a great sign. I think St. Paul has only had one bidder as well, a different bidder.
That's true.
Royal Columbian, is that the third hospital that they're planning to do? I haven't heard from there, but I haven't heard multiple bids going in on that. They're down to 2 bids on the Patello. They're down to 2 bids on the Broadway subway. This construction is going to get a whole lot more expensive on these big projects if companies keep discovering that they're the only bidder in the process.
Not great news if you're a fan of these things getting done on time and on budget, or at all.
Yes, or at all. And of course, as we've seen from the Trudeau spend fest here, nothing governments love to do more than re-announce re-announcements. So I look forward to seeing many more Burnaby Hospital re-announcements over the coming years.
How many millions do you think has been announced in promised spending since the time we started recording?
I don't know. How bad a day is it?
I'm kidding, but it's probably not zero.
What was it last month? $14 billion in federal spending commitments announced? Like $14 billion in vote buying, essentially.
It makes me deeply uncomfortable. It should make, I think it should make most people deeply uncomfortable. It would make me uncomfortable if it was a conservative or an NDP government. It's just, I don't know. It's not like they have a massive surplus and don't know what to do with it either. I mean,
no,
that's
it's
the
all
other
borrowed
thing.
money. You're absolutely right. It's all borrowed money. So, I guess September. We don't see the legislature sit until October. Any sign of the Liberals yet? Are they alive? Are they?
I haven't seen them here, but that's not to say they're not hard at work. Okay. I don't know. I haven't seen them here.
Okay.
I've exchanged messages with several of them.
Okay, if you say so. I guess they will appear at the correct moment. I hope. All right, that's it for us at the Hot Stove. Follow the Orca on Twitter at the Orca BC, Facebook.com/the Orca BC. Double check. Yes, we will be back next week.
Yes, sir.
Troy Aikman AGM tickets go on sale for the ICBA this week, Maclean. So very exciting to welcome a 3-time Super Bowl champion, even if he is a Dallas Cowboy, to ICBA.
I am looking forward to that.
Yes, it'll be great. All right, talk to you all soon.